Welcome back to Hope for Your Life, where we know that life is tough, but there is hope. We're continuing to talk about turning your failure into fuel. How do you manage that failure? How do you recover? In the last episode, we said, recognize, but don't internalize your failure. In other words, it's important to acknowledge your failure or your mistakes, but do not internalize it. Do not incorporate that failure into your view of who you are. Hey, I messed up, but I'm not a messed up person. All right? So we talked about the importance of that. Today, I want to talk to you about another very important point, turning your failure into fuel. And one more very important point today, and that is, we know that failure can be very devastating. We know that you can make some pretty big mistakes that are very costly. You know, losing money, mistakes that cost you to lose opportunities, jobs, you name it. That can be very disappointing and some very grave consequences for some failures out there. But at some point, you have to stop crying about the losses from your failure and start searching for the gains in your failure. What are you talking about? Gains. How can there be gains from failure or from disappointment, from mistakes that you make? Well, I want to talk to you about just four things that can be gains from your failures. One of them is the most obvious, and we've talked about it before. Again, I'll say it, I've said it before. The main objective or the main task in recovering from a failure is to learn, is to grow, right? And so failure can present an opportunity to learn, to grow, to improve, right? When you've recognized, hey, I made a bad choice, and you're able to evaluate your decision, your choice, then you begin to think about better choices. You begin to think about, how can I approach that differently next time so that I have a better outcome, right? So that failure or that mistake, if you look at it right, if you are able to pull yourself away from the losses and the trouble that it's brought you and say, well, what can I gain from it? You can actually gain the ability to grow and learning to make better decisions, right? So that's one gain that can come from failure. Here's another one. Here's a second one. You can gain from your failures a greater awareness of yourself. So if you really, when you've made that failure or you've made that mistake, if you really dig into it, you might discover something about yourself that needs some attention, right? That needs some work. You may discover some things. You know, for example, if you find yourself constantly getting into debt, you just can't resist putting that plastic on the counter and charging up and spending and doing unnecessary things to accumulate debt, right? And you say over and over again, I'm not going to do that. I'm moving toward financial freedom and all of that, but you just can't resist doing that. That may not be just a spending problem. That may be an emotional deficit that you're trying to fill. And you'll keep doing that until you address the real issue underneath it, right? So especially when you have repeated failures, repeated mistakes, you may need to dig into that a little deeper and find out, is there something deeper, something broader that I need to address? Because again, the whole point is I want to be a healthy, happy, whole person, right? And so when we are dealing with failure, that is a gain that can come out of failure. Here's another one. When we have failed, we can gain resilience. We could call it elasticity, the ability to bounce back from difficulties, right? Say you've been working on something, working towards a goal, whether it's a degree or a book you're trying to write or whatever it may be, and you fail again, and you fail again, but you continue to press forward. You continue to forge ahead. You're determined to meet that goal, and you continue to keep moving despite the failures. What are you developing? What are you strengthening? You're developing your resilience. You're strengthening that elasticity so that when any kind of difficulties come your way, you have a stronger ability to bounce back, a stronger ability to keep pushing ahead, right? So it's like you're developing those muscles of resilience when you continue to forge ahead in the face of failure. So once again, failure can actually help you to develop and strengthen your resilience, the ability to deal with challenging and difficult circumstances. So that's another very important point. Here's one last one for you today. How can failure, what gain can you get from your failure? Well, failure can help you to develop new and better patterns of behavior. New and better patterns of behavior. Sometimes the consequences from our failures and our mistakes force us to adopt better practices, take better actions, right? And so sometimes when we have a failure, when we have make a disappointing mistake, the consequences or the results actually push us toward better behaviors, more effective behaviors. And you know, another biblical story comes to my mind. It's a story of someone in the Bible named Jacob. And Jacob was someone who liked to acquire things through trickery and deceit. And I really think he was actually searching for respect and a sense of importance. He did that through deceit and trickery. And one of his favorite targets was his older brother Esau. He liked to trick Esau out of things that he wanted to acquire for himself. And one time he went way too far, made a big mistake, a big failure, and he deceived his father into giving him the inheritance that belonged to his older brother. And as a result, he had to leave his home and relocate to a distant country and live with his uncle, a relative of his mother. But while he was there living in that distant country, he learned the value of hard work. He learned that in order to acquire things that are important, that are meaningful to me, that are of value to me, I have to work and work hard. And so he left that experience gaining the ability and the knowledge that good things come from hard work. That was something important for him to learn. That was an insight that he needed to have in his life that affected every area of his life, right? So because that failure forced him to consider better options and a better pattern of behavior, he came out as a better person. And he actually left his uncle's house with wealth that he earned with his own hands. So once again, when you have a failure, at some point you got to pull yourself out of that mourning and grieving over the consequences and the losses of that failure and start searching for the gains in that failure. And there are others. We just talked about 4 today, but think about it. As you're dealing with that failure or that mistake, search for the gains. What am I coming away from this failure with? And then you'll have a better perspective on even those challenges and difficulties that you're facing. Now, we're going to deal with turning your failure into fuel once more in another episode. We don't want you to miss that. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that bell so that you'll be notified when the new video is coming. And remember, there is hope for your life. No matter how tough the times are, there is hope. We'll see you next time.